with the Palestinian struggle, the call for boycott, supported by the overwhelming majority of Palestinian organizations, came in 2005. And a few years later, we can notch up success after success, much quicker and much faster, although the situation is not as propitious as it was for the South African struggle. Whatever we think of the USSR, at least it wasn't a unipolar world, and there was actual concrete support, including military training for South African freedom fighters. That is not in place here today. Yet, we've made some impressive gains over the past few years. There are other points I want to make. We are told today, but you know, with the Palestinians, where is the Palestinian Nelson Mandela? You might have heard this. Where is the Palestinian ANC? And our answer to that is that we have an organized expression of Palestinian society wanting to support, coordinate, and issuing the call for the BDS. Another point I want to make is that Nelson Mandela was offered freedom many years before he was released from prison if he recognized the Bantustan system. What some Palestinian leaders are being offered in the form of a truncated state, cut off and dissected by settler-only roads, bypasses, settlements, is a parody of sovereignty. It's a parody of a sovereign nation state. They are offered less than what Nelson Mandela was offered. They are offered less than 13% that Nelson Mandela was offered. Hence the steadfastness, hence the samud, which we understand in South Africa, which we recognize, because what they want to do is give Palestinians a Bantustan. They want these places to be reservoirs of cheap Arab labor, and they are including Egypt in this constellation, as well as the Gulf states on the one hand, and Israeli capital on the other. And Palestinians understand this, and they refuse to be party to that kind of settlement. We were also told that sanctions against South Africa would harm South African workers. This was mentioned again and again and again. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu was one of the people who responded by saying that we've suffered so much, we are prepared to suffer a little more if we can hasten the demise of the apartheid state. And this is what Palestinians are saying again. In fact, the situation is even worse there when Israel does not allow any kind of development from taking place. In South Africa, remember this, the South African regime tried to make the Bantustans viable. They built hospitals, by the way, they built schools, they built white elephants called parliaments in the Bantustans, these barren pieces of land. They encouraged investment there. You had Chilean, Taiwanese, and Israeli capital coming there, sponsored by South African government, subsidized even. And what does Israel do? In fact, doesn't even allow this development. Bombs, of the 3,600 industrial plants in Gaza, there's only about 90 left. Only 90 left. When South Africans say that apartheid was worse, apartheid in Israel is worse than what we experience, many people misunderstand this. And I want to qualify why South Africans say this. South Africans who've been there, like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, delegations from COSATU and others. John Dugard, a South African jurist who was the former Special Rapporteur, UN Special Rapporteur on the Palestinian occupied territories. They say this because they see what Israel is doing. And of course, if you were in the frontline states, South African jets bombed the frontline states and caused the death of 1 million people, yes. But South African jets did not bomb Soweto. What we see happening in Gaza. Now we also hear stories about the Histradut. There's a South African connection here. The Histradut invested in apartheid South Africa. This is a fact. There's a brand called KOO, K-O-O. It was in all the supermarkets in South Africa. The Histradut had the major share in that company. I can say much more of the Histradut, but I'm running out of time, and I think we can save them for questions. Now, Richard Falk, Professor Richard Falk, the new UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the Occupied Palestinian Territories, and of course the international law expert from Princeton University, described, even before this latest onslaught, he described Israel's siege of Gaza when it was still not even comparable to what's happening now. This is what he says. It is an irresponsible overstatement to associate the treatment of Palestinians with this. He asked the question, is it an irresponsible overstatement? Many people say if you compare what's happening now to Nazism, you are exaggerating. But this is the question he poses. Is it an irresponsible overstatement to associate the treatment of Palestinians with this criminalized Nazi record of collective atrocity? He answers, I think not. The recent developments in Gaza are especially disturbing because they express so vividly a deliberate intention on the part of Israel and its allies to subject an entire human community to life-endangering conditions of utmost cruelty. Remember, this was written before this latest onslaught. The suggestion that this pattern of conduct is a Holocaust in the making represents a rather desperate appeal to the governments of the world and to international public opinion to act urgently to prevent these current genocidal tendencies from culminating in a collective tragedy. And the most brutal episode of this collective tragedy is what we are seeing today.